Spiritual awakening is not the soft and glowing picture most people imagine. It is not endless light, bliss, or a state where life suddenly feels easy. Awakening is far closer to a death. And the truth is, many are not ready to die, not ready to let go of the old structures that defined them. We want to believe awakening is a beautiful revelation, a single moment where everything aligns. Peace fills our hearts, and all confusion disappears. That idea is comforting, but it is also an illusion. What truly happens is far more intense. Real awakening dismantles everything you thought you were. It tears down false identities, rips apart carefully built illusions, and exposes the shadows you've spent years avoiding. It strips away the comforts you built your existence upon. It is not the beginning of a calm life. It is the end of who you believed yourself to be. This is why so many retreat when it begins. They run back to distraction, back to comfort, back to sleep because the process is painful. Waking up often hurts more than remaining asleep. Yet, for those who are willing to choose truth over comfort, a path opens. The first lesson: the old self must die. Every fragment of who you thought you were, the identity shaped by fear, by society, by trauma, by survival, cannot walk with you into awakening. That version of you was built to protect, not to free. It learned how to please, how to play roles, how to stay small, how to gain approval, how to hide your essence behind masks. Awakening demands the destruction of that false self. It is not a physical death, but an egoic one, more frightening than any physical ending, because the mind fights to survive. The mind clings, bargains, and screams. It insists that letting go means losing everything. Everything: relationships, recognition, purpose, identity. And in a way, it is correct. You will lose everything that was never real. This is the funeral of the false self, and it feels like unraveling, like madness, like you no longer know who you are or what life means. But this is not collapse, is initiation. A caterpillar does not become a butterfly by simply stretching inside its cocoon. It dissolves. It becomes unrecognizable. And so must you. Without this destruction, there is no awakening. If your journey feels comfortable, you have not begun yet. The ego is terrified because its reign is ending. But if you let the false identity burn, if you allow what you once clung to collapse, you will rise no longer a shadow of your past, but something nameless, untouchable, and free. You will not find yourself by holding on to what you were. You will find yourself in the silence that remains after the old has been buried. That silence is where your true self has been waiting. The second truth: comfort is not your ally. It is your enemy. Comfort seduces with whispers. Stay here. Stay safe. Stay with what you know. It lures you back into routines, patterns, and relationships that no longer nourish you, simply because they are familiar. But comfort is not peace. Comfort is stagnation, dressed as safety. The soul awakens not in the predictable, but in the furnace of discomfort. Growth happens in the trembling moments, in the collapse of certainty, in the chaos that strips illusions bare. Yet most return to comfort, because the unknown feels like death. And in many ways, it is the death of the identity, the death of belief systems, the death of the false safety nets. But transformation is found only beyond those comfort zones. It happens in the sleepless nights, in the loneliness that echoes, in the raw confrontation with your own shadow. Discomfort is not punishment. It is a portal. It cracks open the hardened layers of illusion and demands surrender. Still, most run back. They cling to the job that drains them, the relationship that has expired, the beliefs they've outgrown because they crave the familiar. But nothing alive remains the same. Growth requires evolution, not ease. It demands you choose purpose over pleasure, truth over tradition, becoming over belonging. Awakening begins not when you ask, how can I remain comfortable? But when you ask, what is this discomfort teaching me? Every time you choose comfort over growth, you deny your own becoming. But when you embrace discomfort, When you stop labeling pain as a mistake and begin honoring it as a teacher, you discover the truth. Discomfort is not the enemy. It is the doorway to authenticity. Comfort shelters the ego. Discomfort frees the soul. The third truth. You will lose people. One of the hardest realities of awakening is that relationships will shift, sometimes collapse. It is not because you have failed or because love has disappeared. It is because you are no longer that version of yourself that once fit those spaces. When your awareness deepens, when your values shift toward soul rather than conditioning, your external world must adjust. Connections built on illusion cannot survive truth. Friends may feel like strangers. Family members may not understand, may judge, may even reject you. They will say, "You have changed," and they are right. You have died. You are no longer willing to shrink for acceptance, to lie to yourself for peace, to play roles that suffocate your spirit. This loss is painful, but it is sacred. It clears the way for connections that honor who you truly are, not who you pretended to be. Some people never loved you. They loved your compliance, your predictability. When you walk your true path, you are no longer convenient for them. But in losing those connections, you find authenticity. You learn to stand alone, to trust your inner compass even when no one else sees what you see. Awakening is not about collecting approval. It is about shedding everything that isn't real. Losing people is not abandonment. It is redirection. It is the unhooking of what cannot follow you into truth. Let them go. The real ones will meet you in the light. The fourth truth of awakening. There is no map. One of the most unsettling discoveries on this path is realizing there is no fixed guide, no checklist, no guaranteed formula. Awakening is not a journey that unfolds in straight lines. It does not resemble the plans the mind longs for. It is messy, unpredictable, and profoundly personal. The mind craves certainty. It wants a clear destination, a timeline, a teacher who can assure, "Do this, and you will arrive." But awakening refuses to fit into such neat boxes. What liberates one person may feel empty to another. What feels like progress today may look like regression tomorrow. This path is full of paradoxes, clarity, followed by confusion. Stillness, shaken by inner storms. Moments of joy shadowed by waves of grief. Each fluctuation is part of the process. The mind insists on labeling, forward or backward, success or failure. But the soul knows better. It knows the path is not linear, it spirals. Often you revisit the same wounds again and again, not because you are stuck, but because each time you meet them with deeper awareness, each return peels away another layer of illusion, another shield of resistance. The lack of structure can feel terrifying. You realize no one can hand you the perfect method. No one can walk this path for you. No one can give you the exact steps. The more you try to control the unfolding, the more it slips away. And that is the hidden gift. Awakening dissolves the illusion that anyone outside of you has the answers. This path is not about learning how to arrive. It is about surrendering into what you already are, beneath conditioning. The mind panics because it cannot hold what is not linear, but the soul expands because freedom was never meant to be confined within maps or formulas. The absence of a map is not a flaw, it is sacred. It forces you to trust the unknown, to walk blind yet awake, to live each step without guarantees. Awakening is not about reaching an endpoint. It is about living with radical honesty, deep presence, and full awareness in a process that cannot be controlled, only surrendered to. The fifth truth. Your mind will resist you. This is perhaps one of the most disorienting aspects. The very mind that has guided your daily life will rise up like a fierce opponent. The inner voices that once whispered now scream. Doubt tells you that you are delusional. Fear insists you are unsafe without your old structures. Shame whispers that you are unworthy, broken, destined to be abandoned. These voices are not new. They have always been there, hidden beneath layers of distraction. Awakening simply strips away the noise that kept them buried. And once you sit in silence, they echo louder than ever. The mind, faced with collapse of identity, behaves like a cornered animal. It fabricates chaos, projects frightening futures, digs up old pain, drags you into obsessive loops, all to pull you back into unconsciousness. This is why awakening feels like war inside your own head. But paradoxically, this storm is progress. The voices rise because they have been disturbed. They resist exposure because once they are seen, they lose power. Awakening shines light into the very places you once avoided. It brings forth the inner critic, the wounded child, the anxious self, the part that believes love must be earned through struggle. When you sit with them, rather than fleeing, when you observe instead of attaching, when you listen without believing, you begin to reclaim your inner ground. The process is brutal. There are nights when sanity feels fragile, when the temptation to escape is overwhelming. But if you stay present in the fire, something shifts. The mind begins to quiet. Not because it has been conquered, but because it has been seen with compassion. The shift is not in silencing the mind, but in no longer being enslaved by it. The sixth truth. Solitude is essential. Solitude is not a side effect of awakening. It is a requirement. You cannot awaken in a crowd. The deep intimacy with yourself that awakening demands cannot bloom amid noise, distraction, or the constant gaze of others. When you are alone, the masks fall. There is no one left to impress, no one to validate you, no one to rescue you from your own reflection. It can feel unbearable at first. Loneliness creeps in, heavy and sharp. You realize how much of your identity was shaped by relationships, by roles, by the feedback of others. And now, stripped of all that, you are left with only yourself. But in that silence, the soul begins to speak. The truths you buried start to rise. The pain you avoided surfaces. The longings you silenced demand to be heard. Solitude becomes a mirror that cannot lie. It reflects shadows and light alike. This is where transformation happens, not on a stage. Not in applause, not in the chorus of opinions, but in the sacred silence of your own presence. Most fear solitude because they confuse aloneness with abandonment. But solitude is not empty, it is full. Full of clarity, of wisdom, of presence. It strips away illusions until you stand unshaken. Not defined by the world, but by the truth within. Awakening becomes inevitable in this space, because here you discover the essence of your being untouched by roles, free from performance. Solitude reveals that your connection to the infinite was never dependent on anyone else. It only required your willingness to sit, to listen, to be. The seventh truth. Awakening requires unlearning. Many assume spiritual growth is about gathering more and more wisdom, more books, more practices, more knowledge. But real awakening is not about accumulation. It is not stacking truths on top of lies. It is about stripping away everything false until only what is real remains. You must unlearn the conditioning you inherited from parents, from culture, from religion, from society's endless expectations. You must release the stories you absorbed about who you should be, what success looks like, what makes you worthy of love. Awakening is not about adding to yourself. It is about peeling back the illusions that covered the self you always were. The ego resists because it equates unlearning with loss. But what you lose are not truths. They are illusions that were never yours to begin with. From the moment you arrived in this world, you were taught you were incomplete, broken, lacking. You were trained to seek approval, to fear failure, to chase happiness outside yourself, to believe you were separate from the whole. Awakening dismantles these falsehoods, piece by piece. It can feel like destruction because the scaffolding you built your life upon begins to collapse. You may feel emptier, less certain than ever. You may feel as though you know less now than you did before. But this emptiness is not a problem. It is the beginning of truth. Not knowing creates space for what the soul has always known. You do not awaken by becoming more. You awaken by becoming less of what you were told to be, and more of who you already are. The truth does not need to be learned. It needs to be revealed. And revelation comes only when you are brave enough to let the illusions die. Stand in that nakedness. Trust that what remains is not a void but freedom. The eighth truth: you will crave escape, but presence is the medicine. As the pain of awakening rises, and it will, often without warning, your instinct will be to flee. The nervous system screams for relief. The mind searches for exits. You will crave numbing, distraction, anything to silence the ache. You will want to scroll, to eat, to drink, to bury yourself in work, in relationships, in endless busyness. Not because you are weak, but because numbing has been your survival tool for years, maybe for your whole life. You were never taught how to sit with pain. You were taught how to manage, suppress, or explain it away. But awakening pulls every hidden wound into the open. Grief, fear, shame, anger, they surface with full force. And the temptation to run is overwhelming. Yet presence is the only way through. Presence does not judge the pain. It does not try to fix or avoid it. It simply allows it. Presence is the act of staying with yourself in the storm, breathing through the fire without needing to escape. It is holding space for the chaos within, not to punish, but to integrate. Numbing delays the process. It buries the wound deeper, where it festers. But presence begins healing. Presence becomes both medicine and mirror the medicine, because it allows your nervous system to release what it has held for years. The mirror, because it reveals the lessons hidden in the pain. The pain shows you where you abandoned yourself, where you still carry old stories of unworthiness, where fear has been steering your life. Most never awaken fully because they refuse to feel. But awakening is not an idea to be understood. It is an experience to be lived, and presence is the gateway. It demands courage to sit in discomfort without fleeing, to witness the storm without rushing it to end. And when you stay, when you choose presence over numbing, the pain transforms. You see that it was never your enemy, it was your invitation. It rose not to destroy you, but to free you. So when the urge to escape rises, pause, breathe, stay. The pain is not asking you to solve it. It is asking you to see it. The ninth truth: control was always an illusion. One of the most humbling realizations of awakening is this: you were never in control. Not of life, not of outcomes, not even of the path itself. For years, maybe decades, you clung to the belief that if you just tried hard enough, planned carefully enough, managed every detail, you could create safety. But awakening shatters this illusion. You see that your grip was always fragile, that control was never relit, was a coping mechanism born from fear, from trauma, from the desperate need to feel secure. The ego confuses surrender with defeat. It whispers that letting go is weakness, failure, collapse. But surrender is not defeat. It is the only door to true peace. You begin to see how much suffering came from your attempts to control what was never yours to control, how others see you, how relationships unfold, how the future should look. You see how tightly you clung to a steering wheel that was never truly connected. Surrender does not mean you stop showing up. It does not mean you become passive. It means you stop forcing what does not flow. It means you trust the intelligence of life itself, the same intelligence that has been guiding you all along. Even when you could not see it, it means you ride the waves instead of trying to command the ocean. Yes, letting go of control feels like death to the ego, but on the other side of surrender is freedom. A freedom deeper than plans, wider than certainty. A freedom that lets you breathe fully and live softly. When you release control, you discover peace was never about managing life. It was about trusting it. The 10th truth: most people stop at the pain. This is where countless journeys end. People catch a glimpse of something real, a spark of awakening, and then retreat because they did not expect it to hurt this much. They imagined awakening would be bliss, endless peace, a light-filled ascension. They were not prepared for the fire that strips away everything false. But awakening is not gentle in the beginning. It is a burning. It consumes the masks, the roles, the identities you clung to for survival. It dismantles attachments, exposes illusions, and shakes the very ground beneath your feet. And when the fire burns, it feels unbearable. Emotional pain, psychological collapse, even physical strain, it is overwhelming. So most turn back. They go to distraction, to comfort, to numbness, to the old life that felt safe. They return to sleep. But those who dare to keep walking through the fire discover something extraordinary. Beyond the pain is not a slightly improved version of the old life. It is liberation. It is not escape from suffering, but release from being bound by it. Liberation is freedom from the constant fight with reality. It is peace that no longer depends on circumstances being perfect. It is the realization that you were never broken, only buried under layers of illusion. But to reach this, you must endure the fire without flinching. You must allow grief, fear, shame, and disillusionment to surface not as enemies, but as guides. Pain is not a sign something has gone wrong. In awakening, pain is often proof that truth is finally being seen. If you stop at pain, you stop at the doorway. If you walk through, you enter truth. And the fire, though fierce, does not burn away who you are. It burns away everything you are. Not what remains, once the smoke clears, is clarity. What remains is peace. What remains is you, unshakable and free. Deepening the journey now, let us expand upon these truths and see what they are pointing us toward. Awakening is not about becoming something else. It is about dissolving what was never real in the first place. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones, each stone a belief, a fear, a label, a memory, an expectation. You have carried it for so long that you think it is part of you. Awakening is the moment you begin to open the backpack and realize it was never yours to carry. One by one, the stones are removed. At first, it feels terrifying because you have grown attached to their weight. Without them, you feel exposed, naked, vulnerable. But as more stones are released, you begin to sense something you had forgotten: lightness, freedom, breath. This is the paradox. The ego fights to hold the stones because it fears collapse without them. Yet liberation comes not by carrying more, but by letting go. And so awakening is less about learning and more about remembering. Less about gaining and more about releasing. Less about becoming and more about uncovering what has always been there. Standing alone. Awakening is not a path for the faint-hearted, because it will strip you of all false securities. It will require you to stand alone. Not alone in despair, but alone in truth. There will be times when no one around you understands. When the people you once leaned on no longer recognize you. When familiar spaces feel foreign. And in those moments, loneliness can feel like a shadow pressing against your chest. But that loneliness, if you stay with it, transforms into solitude. And solitude, if you trust it, transforms into strength. You begin to realize you are never truly alone. You are supported by the silence, by the stillness, by the vastness of life itself. The need for approval fades. The fear of rejection loses its grip. Because once you discover the unshakable ground of your being, no external opinion can uproot you. Awakening as a death and rebirth. Awakening is often described as death before rebirth. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is truth. You cannot step into authenticity without first allowing the false to die. Death here does not mean the end of your physical existence. It means the end of who you pretended to be. The death of roles that suffocated you. The death of identities you wore like armor. The death of beliefs that kept you chained. And though this death feels like loss, it is actually liberation, because every ending clears space for the beginning that follows. Every collapse creates room for what is real to emerge. When the false self dissolves, what rises is not something new, but something timeless. Your essence, your truth, your soul unburdened. The invitation of awakening. Understand this clearly. Awakening is not reserved for a select few. It is not limited to saints or sages. It is the natural unfolding of every soul that dares to choose truth over illusion. But it demands courage. Courage to walk into discomfort when the mind screams for safety. Courage to face the inner storm without escape. Courage to let the old life crumble without rushing to rebuild it. Courage to walk alone when others cannot follow. And so awakening is not just a process, it is a continual choice. Each moment, you are invited. Will you choose comfort or truth? Will you cling to illusion or allow it to dissolve? Will you retreat into sleep or stay awake in the fire? The path is not easy, but it is real, and nothing real can ever be lost. By now it is clear. Awakening is not a smooth road, nor is it a destination you can capture. It is a fire that strips away illusions, a mirror that shows you both your shadow and your light. And it is this fire that becomes your greatest teacher. Pain, which once felt like an enemy, reveals itself as sacred instruction. Fear, which once seemed to block your path, becomes the very threshold you must step through. Doubt, shame, and grief, all the emotions you once buried, become guides, pointing you toward the freedom that lies beyond them. The mind insists, this should not be happening. But awakening whispers, this is exactly what must happen. Every collapse is not punishment, but purification. Every loss is not rejection, but redirection. Every silence is not emptiness, but space for truth to emerge. When you learn to stop running from pain, when you allow it to pass through you without resistance, you discover its true nature. Pain is not here to break you. It is here to free you. What awakening demands? Awakening demands a kind of bravery rarely spoken of in ordinary life. It demands that you sit with discomfort when everything in you craves distraction. Let go of control when your mind insists. You must hold on. Trust the unknown when certainty dissolves. Release relationships that no longer align, even if it breaks your heart. Walk without a map, guided only by the quiet whisper within. It is not glamorous. There is no applause, no medals, no instant reward. Instead, there is silence, surrender, and steady transformation. But what you gain cannot be measured in external recognition. You gain authenticity, the ability to stand as you are, without masks. You gain presence, the ability to experience life fully, moment by moment. And you gain freedom, the ability to move through life unbound by fear, illusion, or the opinions of others. Returning to the self at the core of awakening is not becoming someone new, but returning to who you have always been. Beneath the conditioning, beneath the survival patterns, beneath the false identities, your essence has always been present. It is like the sun behind the clouds. The clouds shift, change, and obscure the light, but the sun has never stopped shining. Awakening is not about creating light, it is about removing what hides it. And when that light breaks through, you realize something profound. You were never lost, only covered. You were never broken, only convinced that you were. You were never unworthy, only told stories that made you forget your inherent value. This return is not loud. It is quiet, steady, unshakable, a peace that cannot be given or taken away. The cost of awakening, make no mistake, the price of awakening is high. You will lose illusions. You will lose false comforts. You will lose relationships that cannot meet you in truth. You will lose the identity you thought was you. But consider the cost of not awakening. The cost of remaining asleep is your soul. It is living a life built on roles, masks, and conditioning. It is carrying the weight of fear until your final breath. Yes, awakening costs much, but sleep costs everything. When you weigh them against each other, the choice becomes clear. The pain of awakening is temporary. The peace it reveals is eternal. Walking the path awakening is not a single event. It is not something you check off as complete. It is a lifelong unfolding. Each moment, you are invited to choose presence over escape, truth over illusion, surrender over control. There will be days of clarity, days where silence feels like home, where freedom feels natural. There will also be days of storm, where old patterns resurface, where fear rises again. This does not mean you have failed. It means you are still walking. The path spirals. You'll revisit lessons at deeper levels. Each time, you meet them with more awareness, more courage, more compassion. That is growth, not perfection, but presence. So do not measure awakening by how serene you appear. Measure it by how willing you are to remain awake, even when it hurts. Coming home at the end of all the burning. After the collapse, after the silence, what remains is something no fire can destroy. What remains is you untouched, unshakable, real. Awakening is not about reaching some faraway state. It is about coming home to yourself. It is about realizing that what you sought outside has always lived within. Peace, freedom, love, they are not destinations. They are your essence uncovered. And once you see this, you understand, nothing can take it away. Not loss, not fear, not death itself. Because what you are is not temporary. What you are is timeless. So let the false burn. Let the illusions collapse. Let the old self die. On the other side of that death is life, not the half-life of pretending, but the full aliveness of truth. This is the invitation of awakening. To choose reality over illusion. To walk through fire and discover you are the flame. To surrender everything false and find that nothing real can ever be lost. And when you accept that invitation, you no longer chase peace, you become it.